Welcome to Into the Night. I'm Nari, your guide on today's excursion down a twisted path. Be careful not to get lost. Be it dark or light, it's easy to lose your way. Are you ready? Then let's begin. An Able-Bodied Man. The alarm rang, jolting Philip Sorensen awake. Rolling over, he grabbed his glasses from the nightstand and put them on to check the time. Certainly it couldn't be time to rouse himself from bed. It was. Groaning, he ran his fingers through his dark hair and then stretched. 5 hours didn't seem nearly long enough to sleep, but their work at the lab demanded extended workdays. Down the hall, he heard his coworkers also confronting the reality that their day had begun. Philip swung his door open to find Ray Stroud in his robe, carrying a cup of steaming coffee.
Hey, Phil. Rise and shine, huh? Good morning to you, Ray. Do they have anything decent to eat this morning? The same gourmet fare as usual.
The two men chuckled.
This is the worst 5-star hotel in the world.
Ray unlocked his dorm room, taking tentative sips of his coffee as he entered.
This sure as hell isn't the Ritz-Carlton,
Phil muttered. Still, his stomach rumbled and he needed caffeine, badly. So he stumbled down the hall to the breakfast room. As he sat at a table, eating a less than satisfying piece of toast, he considered himself lucky that the lab provided housing for its employees. He shuddered to think how early he'd have to rise if he had a commute. He stared out the window overlooking the parking lot. No birds sang yet, and the world still slept in the pre-dawn hours. Phil wasn't even sure what day of the week it was. Returning to his room, he shaved, showered, and prepared for the day ahead. On his way to the lab, he met Ellen Mulvaney in the hall. She yawned and then smiled at him. Morning, Phil. We look like a couple of live wires today.
That we do, he said as he returned her smile. We are so close to succeeding, though. Maybe the past 5 years will have been worth it. Maybe, if we can actually do this, we'll be able to finally have a decent night's sleep.
I don't believe in fairy tales, Phil. Ellen's eyes sparkled as she gently elbowed her coworker. Phil looked at her, and she wasn't sure what to make of it. What? Ellen furrowed her brow and looked at him. What are you looking at?
Oh, nothing. You're funny, that's all.
Phil, however, once again noticed just how pretty Ellen was when she smiled. Ray, now dressed and caffeinated, jogged down the hall to catch up with them.
Hey, what are you two talking about?
Oh, nothing. We were complaining about being tired, that's all, Ellen added. Ray grinned at them as though he'd discovered a secret.
Give it a break, Stroud. Philip shook his head and stared at Ray. What? What did I say?
Ray raised his hand to his chest, feigning shock and indignation. Patricia Cowden, the head of their division, approached. Okay, time to stop with the theatrics. We all need to be at our stations in 5 minutes, so get a move on. At 5 feet in height, Patricia didn't appear intimidating, or at least not at the outset. Fair but tough, congenial but straightforward, she evoked respect from her employees and her employer.
Yes, ma'am. We're on our way. Stroud here was just telling us how surprised he was at his time for work.
Patricia Cowden laughed.
Don't ever take a polygraph test, Sorensen, because it's not going to end well for you.
Her smile and the sparkle in her eyes let the others know that she, too, wasn't above teasing her coworkers. Turning to Stroud, she said,
I can't imagine what secret you discovered in the hallway this morning.
She then looked at Philip and Ellen and gave them a good-natured wink. The two blushed and broke eye contact with Patricia and Ray, who shared a knowing look between them. The attraction between Ellen Mulvaney and Philip Sorensen was obvious to anyone who saw the two together, and they'd become the talk around the lab. No one minded their familiarity, and most of their coworkers secretly cheered them on. "We'd better hurry and get to the lab," Ellen said, trying to change the subject as she picked up her pace down the corridor.
"Wait for us, Speed Demon,"
Ray Stroud shouted after her as he and the rest of the group hurried their pace to catch up with Ellen. Once they reached the lab, however, they set all joking aside. They'd worked tirelessly for years, and now they stood on the precipice of the breakthrough they'd hoped for. Results of testing on mice looked promising, and everyone felt an electric buzz of excitement in the lab. They forgot any exhaustion they felt or other distractions to their work. They focused wholeheartedly on their goal: create superhuman hybrids who could withstand the rigors of long-distance space travel. At times, in the dark of the night when they took time to consider the ethics of such a venture, they worried that they played the part of modern-day Frankensteins. Only occasionally did they discuss such concerns with one another. However, they did so in hushed voices.
"I don't know, man. Are we playing God?" "Ray, I have no idea. We're in too deep to stop now, though. Besides, if we quit, they'll continue the program anyway. They're hell-bent on going into deep space with this." "If we do come up with the right formula, who would volunteer to be injected with it? I don't think they will find many takers." "Well, I overheard some of the supervisors say they're planning to use inmates." "Are you serious?" "Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, they broke the law, but I don't think they should be used as lab rats." "Are they even given a choice?" "I don't know. I'd like to think so, but who knows? The government always gets its way, and none of us can stop it. We can't worry about that right now. We need to keep our heads down and do what we can to be useful." "I know, but the formula will turn them into superhumans with long lives, but not much to enjoy about living." "Shh! Keep your voice down. Maybe they shouldn't have broken the law, and they wouldn't be in this situation. I think a long life exploring deep space would have to be way better than sitting in a prison cell day after day." "I guess."
Then they would hear footsteps coming, which quickly ended their conversations. No one wanted to openly question the project. Tight security kept communications with the outside world at zero, and conversations regarding the ethical nature of the lab were frowned upon. Word had it that informants lived and worked among them, and anyone seen not as loyal to the project would be reported on, and no one wanted to lose his job. Paranoia took firm hold of the employees, and that kept them in line. Years passed with only incremental progress, but in recent days, initial tests looked promising. Everyone took on a full steam-ahead mentality, and the upper echelon supervisors teased bits of information out of the employees. According to the rumors, the space program would become operational soon. Late nights and early mornings brought the team ever closer to success. The sparks between Philip Sorensen and Ellen Mulvaney also grew in intensity during the weeks and months leading up to the mission. At first, they shared shy glances or brushed hands in the hallway. Finally, Philip took a leap of faith.
"Ellen, if I'm out of line, let me know, but would you want to have dinner with me?"
Excitement flashed in her eyes. "I would, Phil. That would be great."
"I'll try to whip something up better in my mini kitchen than the cafeteria food we eat."
"Then definitely count me in." The two laughed, both out of nervousness for stepping into the realm of dating, and because the cafeteria food was notoriously bland and unappetizing. That night, they enjoyed a pleasant meal together and held hands while watching a movie. The next night, they did the same, and soon, they spent every moment together that they could.
"I know the bosses don't want us fraternizing, but Elle, I think I've loved you since the first moment we met."
"Wasn't that when I ate that horrible hot dog in the cafeteria and the mustard dripped down my lab coat?"
He let out a hearty laugh. "Yes, that's the time. I knew I loved you then.
I'm not quite sure how my knack for wearing my lunch was so appealing, but I'm not going to complain.
It was the way you could laugh at yourself that impressed me. Too many beautiful women are stuck on appearances. You wore that mustard with pride.
I guess I should have to be thankful for that mustard then. She wrapped her arms around him and nestled into his embrace. Soon the couple talked of marriage and children once their time at the lab finished. Keeping their relationship secret from the management was difficult, but their podmates smiled and looked the other way as the romance blossomed. No one begrudged the two some happiness. A few envied their relationship, but no one wanted to see it end. Life in the compound was lonely and bleak. Their colleagues appreciated knowing that at least someone in their midst found a bright spot in an otherwise mundane existence. Work was all most had to focus on, so Philip and Ellen's relationship added some variety to their days. One day, Patricia Cowden called a surprise lab-wide meeting on Tuesday. The employees rolled their eyes.
Meetings like this tend to last for hours and give me a headache, Ray said as he slumped his shoulders.
Nevertheless, they filled into the large conference room. Patricia and the upper management, who rarely made appearances inside the lab, smiled and motioned for them to take their seats. Patricia took to the microphone while her bosses sat behind her and looked on.
Today is an exciting time, but we have some good news and bad news.
Groans and whispers spread through the crowd.
Patricia smiled once more and said, "No need to sound disgruntled. The bad news is that it's time for all of us to receive our yearly vaccinations. Keeping healthy is vital to accomplishing the work that we do."
Patricia looked to her left where a team of nurses set up immunization stations for the employees.
A through L, go to line 1. M through P, go to line 2. Q through Z, go to line 3. I already had mine, and the sooner we are finished with the vaccinations, the sooner I can tell you the wonderful news we have.
I hate these shots. They always make me feel sick for the next few days, Ellen said as she and Philip walked toward their respective lines.
Yeah, but it's better than coming down with one of those diseases. Since the lab next to ours works on biomedical projects, it's better to be safe than sorry.
I guess you're right. I've never been a fan of needles, but I don't want to come down with any strange mutated diseases they likely tinker with. One by one, the employees received their shots and filed back to their seats. Once everyone was settled, Patricia addressed them again.
Now for the good news. We have worked tirelessly to make deep space travel a reality. And I wanted to tell you myself that we have succeeded.
She turned to look behind her as a big screen played rousing music and showed images of spaceships designed for those voyages.
We did it!
Cheers erupted from the crowd. Patricia turned and applauded the company dignitaries and then looked back at the crowd. She lifted her arms to signal them to stand and applaud the supervisors as well. With broad smiles on their faces, the men briefly stood and bowed, acknowledging the adulation. Each company official took turns giving speeches that stressed the importance of the mission for mankind and their appreciation of the tireless work the lab employees did to bring the plan to fruition.
In 2 weeks, the first mission will launch. We are so proud of all of you.
CEO Dan Monroe told the men and women who sat before him. More cheers erupted from the crowd once more. After all the speeches ended, Patricia opened the meeting up for questions. A few asked about the length of time the subjects would be in space, what specifically the project might accomplish, etc. Ellen wiped sweat off her brow. Concerned, Phil said,
"Hey, are you feeling okay?"
"Yeah, the immunization is kicking in. I feel like I'm coming down with the flu." Phil put his arm around her.
"It's going to be okay. Once this meeting is over, I'll fix you something to eat and you can get some sleep."
Ray raised his hand and Patricia called on him.
"Yes, Mr. Stroud, what is your question?" "We've heard through the grapevine that the formula will be used on inmates. Is this true?"
The crowd hushed.
"Yes, that is true. We felt that it was best to experiment first on a captive group, you might say. The inmates won't have exposure to the outside world, so if a problem did result from the efficacy or infectiousness of the formula,
The general public wouldn't be in jeopardy. Relieved sighs swept through the room. Now that she puts it that way, I feel better about them experimenting on inmates, Ray whispered to Phil. I don't know. I still don't like it. A man 3 rows behind the friends asked the next question. How long will it take after the inmates are given the formula before they show effects? Are we sure 2 weeks is enough time for the transition to take place? Another smile from Patricia came with a vigorous nod as she said, Oh yes, the results take effect in a matter of minutes. In fact, I believe you're feeling the first changes, now. The crowd gasped. Did you say we? Was shouted by several people. They stared in horror at one another to find that they'd changed into strange new beings. Larger than normal humans, but unusually docile given the news they'd received. Only their name tags differentiated between who had been who. Phil stood. I thought you said inmates would be given the formula. Why have you given it to us? His voice cried the tears he could no longer form. That's quite simple, actually, if you think about it. How many years have you been kept here in this compound? 5? 6? Do you ever go anywhere besides the lab? Are you allowed contact with the outside world? Speechless, the crowd stared at her. I think all those factors make you inmates by definition. Who better to enjoy the benefits of their hard labor than the men and women who created the formula? It's great news, isn't it? Now you can live long lives without the concerns of finding true love or worrying about mortgage rates. Isn't that a relief? The crowd remained silent while military personnel filed into the room. Row by row, the group of mutated beings were being loaded onto waiting buses to be transported to their pre-flight training. Patricia beamed. It is truly a great day. Dan Monroe patted her on the back. It certainly is. How about we go out and enjoy a martini and dinner at your favorite restaurant? My treat. The two walked away, arm in arm. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Into the Night Anthology podcast. Written by Caroline Giamanco, narrated by Nari. Theme music by Nico Rodriguez. All other original music, sound design, and editing by Omen Hawk Studios. You can find our links in the show notes. Into the Night is on your favorite podcatcher, so make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review to help other excursionists to join us. I'll see you next time. And remember, whether in the shadows or in the daylight, all twisted paths lead you into the night. Into the Night Anthology is a Creative Typo Entertainment production.